Welcome to the Twinkl Talks EYFS podcast. Working in the early years is busy, funny, messy, and exhausting. Join me, Shana, some of the Twinkl EYFS team, special guest speakers, and other early years practitioners as we talk honestly about our experiences. Whether you're listening for CPD, on your commute, or to help you relax, Twinkl EYFS will share everything you need to know about all things early years.
Hello and welcome to another podcast episode. My name's Katie.
And I'm Charlotte.
And I'm Fliss.
And I'm Hannah.
And in today's episode, we're going to be taking some of your early years problems that you've sent in to us or that we've seen on social media and talk about our experiences and knowledge in those areas.
So we've seen a few questions about supervisions and what they kind of look like in early years settings, how often you had yours. So I didn't really have much experience of this. So what did it look like for you guys?
I don't know about you, Charlotte and Hannah, but I, as a practitioner and as a manager, I kind of hated supervision time because it kind of felt like a little bit of a forced process of what we had to do because you had to have paperwork to prove to Ofsted that you were doing these self-evaluation form things. And I think if done correctly, totally worthwhile, and I can see the point. I just don't know if I've had the best experience of them. I don't know if you know where I'm coming from with that.
Yeah, I think it can feel like a real paperwork task, like ticking boxes, writing comments just for the sake of it, and then actually if it's not going to improve your practice or allow you to discuss something that's been bothering you, then it's actually a really pointless process. And we all know how short of time everyone is in early years, and there's always so many other things to do. And as a manager, I'd spend time planning, I'm going to do so and so supervision this week, and then inevitably someone's off sick, something goes wrong, and then a whole week's gone by, you haven't got to that supervision, and you're probably not going to get to it. So it's one of those things that as a manager and as a practitioner, like I said, it's actually really frustrating, especially if you've been waiting to go and see your manager all week and you're going to have your supervision, and you just want to get it over and done with.
Yeah. What about you, Charlotte?
We used to try have them every 3 months. That was the rule. So there was like a chart on the wall in the office with a date of when everyone was due to have their supervision and who would be taking it, because the room leaders usually did the supervisions for their practitioners or apprentices or students, whoever they had, and then the manager would do the room leaders. So I used to have mine with my manager, but sometimes it just went on for hours because we'd just be chatting, not even about work. Sometimes it'd just be we'd be sat chatting about my life and because she'd be like, "Oh, how are you?" And then I'd just start rambling about all the stuff that's going on in my life. And she'd be 3 hours later, "Charlotte, come on, we need to
we've got work to
actually talk about your job now." But I used to find, like Hannah said, it's hard when people ringing sick or, something's happening in your room and you just can't physically get out at the time to go do it because they're not quick. Well, I used to find they weren't quick. They did take quite a long time, with all the paperwork to fill in and stuff. And then if you had a member of staff that you knew it was going to be a difficult conversation or it was going to be quite long because there was a lot that they needed to improve on, or there was a lot that had been brought up by other staff members that you've got to kind of report back. I used to hate doing those ones because it used to be really awkward because you just be sat there so I need to mention this. But yeah, I didn't particularly enjoy them. We did do quite well, and then they kind of just dropped a bit. And then, because we used to have appraisals, I don't know if you guys had those either.
Yeah, I take appraisals and supervisions under the same kind of umbrella.
We never really got the appraisal one. But my manager used to have an open door policy. So she was if you ever just do need to chat to me and you haven't got your supervision coming up, she was just come in and we'll book some time and talk about it. So
it was interesting to hear how you've kind of put it in two parts. From what you said, it sounds like there's a first part where somebody's got to fill in some paperwork, they fill in the paperwork, and then part two comes along where you discuss with some kind of manager or leader what you've written down.
Everyone had their own blue file and then it had all their stuff in it. So sometimes you'd only get half of it done and then maybe a month later you get the other half done. So it was never done sometimes altogether. It was just a bit scatty. So then you kind of forgotten about what you'd said before. So
does that match up to your experience, Hannah, having to complete stuff pre-meeting?
Yeah, and it's kind of then becomes a bit, you started your form weeks ago and it's got lost in the room and all scrumpled up, and you finally get back to it and it's you've kind of almost gone past the point of doing the supervision. So yeah, I think it can be a really long drawn out process that actually isn't that valuable for everyone.
I found it interesting, Charlotte, that you said like the room leader used to do the team in their room, not the manager. If I ever had it, like I've always known it to be the manager or the deputy manager do the supervisions, because I don't know, what if you've got a problem with, if they ask you in the supervision, how do you feel? Like, are you happy in the room? I wouldn't want to say that to the room leader.
That's what used to make it more awkward, because if you knew they had an issue with you or an issue with someone else, sometimes it kind of just turn into a bit of a gossip kind of thing where they'd be like, oh, I don't like so and so, and we were like, well, that's not really the point of this. Like, we can talk about that, but it would just get sometimes a little bit, and then I'd know stuff about someone else who didn't like someone else, and then yeah, it just used to sometimes get a little bit unprofessional, not on my part, but sometimes on the practitioner's parts. But
I guess as well with supervisions and stuff, like my experience in my nursery was that it was an open door policy. So I didn't ever have like a formal one, but for me, I'd say I did have them, because I'd go into the office and speak to them, and like sometimes when I'd be finishing at the end of the day, or if I'm starting, putting my phone away and it was just me and the manager in the office, she'd ask me like a few questions like, how am I, and that sort of thing. And then if I ever did have anything that I wanted to speak about, I'd then sit down and speak to them then. So like, I guess it kind of like maybe takes the pressure off a little bit of having an actual sit down supervision, being like, look, I'm asking you all these questions, I want you to answer them. Whereas like if you're doing it like off your own back with an open door policy, you want, I don't know, say if you think you want to improve in one area, you go and speak to them, or like, and the manager just catches you at the end of the day, say like, oh, like, can we just have a couple of minutes chat? This training would really benefit you. I guess it takes like the pressure off for the practitioner and the manager if they were done in that kind of way.
Yeah, I think what you've both touched on, which is what I found so often, is that the supervision really is only as good as the person doing the supervision. And if you're having your supervision and you're wanting to raise a problem that you have perhaps with a particular style of practice or with a particular person for whatever reason, and there's no way to avoid it, it's going to be the same regardless of the sector of your job, you're going to be super aware of who you're talking to. So I think sometimes they are quite forced, because you can't, or you may not feel comfortable or confident allowing yourself to be completely honest. If your manager's sitting you down or your room leader being like, are you happy at work? It takes like a lot of balls to be like, no, I'm actually quite unhappy at work. You have to be really quite confident to be like, I'm actually having a really hard time at the moment. And that's not easy for a lot of people to do. So I think that needs to be taken into account. So it is what people are saying to you in your supervision, but as a manager, you need to be really aware of what's going on in the day-to-day practice, so you can pick up the stuff that person might not necessarily be saying to you.
I think like Fliss was describing like a much like kind of more organic style of supervision, and rather than just sitting down at a set time, like 3 months has come around, it's time for your supervision, but actually having that open door and kind of engaging all the time.
It would save a lot of time on rota work, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
My only problem with this more casual approach is then people tend to only go to you when you have a problem. People are like, you don't just walk in and like, really like my job today, I'm having a great time, it's been a good couple of weeks. You're more likely to go in and be like, I'm actually really unhappy about this, you need to change it. So then the people that are doing fine and are just ticking along nicely, you have to be careful that they don't get lost or swept under the rug.
Yeah, there'll probably always be people who like slip through the net because they're doing okay, or they haven't really, or they don't want to raise a problem. So then you'd never speak to them.
So you've got to find that balance between being organic about it and taking off that pressure and actually getting to the cause and root of things that you need to talk about, and actually making sure that everyone gets spoken to and feels like a listened to part of your setting.
My manager used to have a flip chart of different sayings on a desk, and when I used to come in on an early, I used to flip it on something rude and then leave it there facing her, and she'd be like, is this you? I'd be like, yeah.
That's how I feel about you today.
Yeah.
This question that we got is about learning journeys. So do you do online or paper? Like, which is best, online versus paper? To me, when I first heard this, I was like, surely everyone does online.
Yeah, but they don't.
Yeah.
But I would never, like, if I was looking for a job now and there was a setting and I went in and did my little tour and they were like, oh, we're all paper based, I would say no.
Same.
Because things get lost. It's so much more extra work and printing and paper, and it's 2023. I care about the planet. It blows my mind to think. And having used apps now, it's so convenient. Like your handovers are different now that you know having to explain to parents every single nappy change because it's already on the app when they get home.
And I think just like inputting data like onto the iPad I don't know, like you could take it outside whilst they're playing, just quick on the iPad, whereas like you've got loads of paperwork, you'd be flying everywhere. Like
reports can just be filled in based on what's been done in observations, and it's just you adding in a couple of comments. Whereas before, like I had to highlight off areas at the EYFS and things, and that was just, it just took time, and there was just constant arguments over lost paperwork. And as we've learned from Charlotte's experience, children draw on your paperwork.
They do. I mean, the only thing that I miss from doing paper learning journeys is like the creative side of it, because I used to just love like
imagine you was like
I used to like personalise each learning journey to the child. So I used to have stickers and all sorts, and I used to just like jazz it all up, whereas I couldn't do that on the tablet, so it used to make me a bit sad.
Should have the option to like change the profile.
Yeah, you should be able to put like cute little clip arts and stuff on. I think that's why I took loads of selfies on it, because I need my own stamp on this. But yeah, they cut out so much, like cutting pictures out so we had to back all our pictures that went in our learning journeys. And that just used to take so much time. So obviously now having it on tablet is so much easier. The only downfall is when it...
And I'm glad I never worked in a nursery that was the paper. Like by the time I'd started, it was all iPads.
Exhausting. Having to do the little learning books that we'd put a couple of pieces of work every month. You would find yourself get behind on it because it was just a bit of a ball-ache job.
We used to do the art folders. So like they'd have all the artwork, and then like we'd do like make it into like one from each month, like a bit of the artwork, like you stick it in. And I was just like, well,
I remember though, like we used to let some parents take them home so they could have an extra look, and some of them used to come back trashed. And I mean trashed. And like obviously practitioners have put so much effort into these learning journeys, and they'd have like coffee stains. The children had got hold of them and ripped all the pages out, and they just shoved them back in. And you just think, why have I done all that hard work? And you've literally treated it like it's just nothing. Whereas on the tablets now, at least they can't. I mean, the only downfall is when they crash. The system crashes or your Wi-Fi goes or something.
It's like an initial, there's a big cost, because obviously you have to buy the program, you have to teach your staff how to use it, you have to buy tablets. But actually, I think that pays for itself really quickly in the time saved. And some of the apps, we used to be able to message the parents throughout the day, so which was more convenient for everyone than a phone call. You'd be able to do like their invoices and stuff, so like you weren't having to give those out to parents, which was always a tricky one. Everything for the nursery was on the app, and I think that's just a much cleaner, better way of performing. And again, it's 2023, like it feels so old-fashioned to not be doing that.
So one of the practitioner problems we got asked was, how often do staff move rooms in the nurseries? So you might work in baby room and then get moved to preschool. So how do you guys find it's worked in your settings before?
So my experience is, and I don't know if you guys can relate, like genuinely like 80 to 90% of the time, it was probably because there was problems with the staff in the rooms. So that might be that the practitioners weren't particularly getting along, or that it wasn't like the strongest team that it could be, and that because of that there ended up being movements.
Or like the staff just genuinely wanting to try a different age or whatever. I mean, at one point I was considering going to babies, and I don't know, I think it's more just if it's the staff issue or staff wanting to change. They don't actually just say, oh, you've been working in babies for 2 years now, let's move you to preschool. Like, I don't know.
It was always quite purposeful. Like I said, there was an issue, or like you said, someone wanted to move.
I think as well, if you've got knowledge in a certain area, like I was in preschool because I had a lot of knowledge working with the older children, so it just made sense for me to work in preschool, and nobody ever sort of was like, Charlotte, do you want to move to babies?
You become part of that.
And I never really asked to move because I was, happy where I was. And everyone was just like, preschool's your room, like we won't change you unless we need to. So obviously I just stayed there.
There was also quite a lot, perhaps room leaders or other people would change because one room needed a certain support in more areas. So, for example, if there was a lot of SEND children, it might be that a certain person would go into that because they have, like you said, the experience, so that they would be a better leader for that room. Or it might be that there's a lot of children moving up who had a particular key person at the same time. So actually, it would make sense for that key person to move room with them to ensure that consistency.
And I think sometimes like the busyness of your room can sort of contribute. So if you've got, like, we used to have one room at one point and I think it has like 4 children in it.
Gosh, that's so quiet.
So you don't really need all those practitioners in there. So some people would get moved while it was quieter into a busy room, and then they would, once it got a bit busier, they'd just get moved back. You got to be flexible, I think, really.
Yeah. I think it's quite nice, like, now I do a bit of supply, so it's nice that I get to go in each room and like work with all the different ages. I mean, I still prefer being in the toddlers, because that's where I feel like I do best in there as well. I know how to be with them children more than I do with babies in preschool. But like, it is nice to like just float around sometimes. Like, we have members of, like, full-time members of staff that were like floaters, like to fill in gaps for ratio and stuff like that. But yeah, I think if I changed rooms every year, I'd be a bit like, you know, like in schools, sometimes you'd be a reception teacher one year, you'd be a year 2 teacher the next, then come back to reception. I just think, that'd be too much chopping and changing for me.
I think when you've got key children as well, it is hard to keep constantly moving people, because if you just got to know those children and then they're like, oh, you're going to go to babies now, it can be a bit frustrating for some people when they've just settled into a room with their key children. Yeah. But like, floaters don't always have key children.
Yeah.
So
the only time in my experience that there would be like clockwork regular changes would be for apprentices. And so in one of the nurseries I worked at, sort of every 3 months, all of the apprentices would rotate round, I think, just so that by the time they got, because it was 4 rooms, because there was 2 sets of baby rooms, so by the time it got to the end of 1 year, when most of them had started to complete whatever level they were doing, they'd had experience.
I think that's a good idea. Yeah, you will get the experience. I know apprentices that have just stayed in one room, so it's quite nice that they do that. Like, you, at the end of the day, you've got to learn about from 0 to 5, so it makes sense to move around, doesn't it?
The idea of just being in one room during an apprentice is actually quite crazy.
Yeah.
Like, you need to have experience of all the ages.
I mean, they went and like covered in other rooms, and they had to do like the bottle feeding, so then they had to go and like work in babies for like an afternoon or something.
That's when they'd be holding it awkwardly with the bottle, like, what do I do?
Yeah.
What is this?
But I think every apprentice should move around.
Yeah. We used to, every now and then, people, like you said, would go and cover in a different room. And then that would always be quite a good experience, I think. Just like, I think when if you're like, for example, if you're normally in baby room, going to spend an afternoon in preschool, probably completely chaotic for you because it's so different. I bet your afternoon or your day goes a lot quicker just for that like brief day that you swap over.
Imagine how many like practitioners actually have like done that. They've gone and covered and thought, you know what, I actually want to change.
Well, this is like, I started to teach, when I first started, I was a teacher, I thought year 6, maybe even secondary school. How I ended up getting lower and lower and lower until somehow babies is where I like excelled. I have no idea, but it was just constant swapping and changing until I got there. So you never really know what you like, and your preferences change. But I think most settings take that into account. Every early years interview I've ever done, unless it's been like very specifically for like a toddler room leader role, for example, they always ask like, what age do you prefer working with, and they try and put you with them. I think because you'll be better.
Yeah, I got asked that on my interview.
Well, I originally went for baby room. Can you imagine?
No.
I went for preschool.
Whole of a world I've been brought into. But then they were like, no, we think you'd be better suited in preschool with your experience. So I was like, okay, that's fine.
That makes sense to me. I also can, like, definitely preschool, but I also can see you with preschool.
Yeah, because I did my experience at uni in a nursery, and I was in the toddlers and I didn't like that, and then I moved to the preschool and I liked that, and then I did my final placement in the year 1 class and I really liked that. So then I was like, well, I want to do preschool, but they only had the job available in toddlers, and then eventually I like that. But now I'd say I like all of them now, but I think I've been in babies quite a lot. Like recently, I quite like being in babies. But
the other part of me is like, whether you like the age group or not, get over it, because that is where you are working, and your job is to work with 0 to 5. So just do it.
You don't go into childcare because you want to work with like a specific age group. Like, I don't go past 2.
I don't work with ones.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode. As always, you can follow us on social media where you can ask us your own early years problems. We've got Facebook groups, TikTok, Pinterest, YouTube, Instagram. If it exists, we're probably on it. But in the meantime, we'll speak to you soon. Bye.
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 So that's it for today's episode. I hope you really enjoyed it. If you would like to join in or would like to know more, then come and find us on our social media sites. We have a Facebook page, Facebook groups, an Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Pinterest, and YouTube. All the links of where to find us will be in our podcast description. Come and join the conversation. And whatever you're doing today, I hope you have a great day.